Hello everyone, myself Ansh and I welcome you all to my YouTube channel A New Sunrise. In this video, we are going to discuss the topic that is materials, metals and non-metals. That is class 8 science chapter number 4. We are going to explain it and I am going to give you some notes. This video is the part 2. One more part has been created of this video previously. So you can go and watch this video. The link of the video is in description box and also in the comment box. So let's start with it. First of all, let us see what are the topics that we are going to cover in this video. We will cover physical properties of metal and non-metal. Under this, we are going to learn about several topics like lusture, hardness, malleability, conductivity, ductility and sonorous. Next, we would learn about chemical properties of metal and non-metal. Under this topic, we are going to study about a reaction of metals and non-metals with oxygen, reaction of metal and non-metal with water, reaction of non-metal and metal with acids and bases, displacement reaction as well as reactivity series. So, let's start. Our first topic, that is physical properties of metal and non-metal. Lusture. Lusture is the appearance of a substance surface in terms of its light reflective qualities. Some materials are lustrous and shiny, which are called to be as metals. Metals possesses characteristics of lustrous. They are lustrous. They have their own shine. Example of metals are gold, silver, copper, etc. Whereas non-metals does not possesses any such characteristics. They are very dull in appearance. Some materials are non-lustrous and dull, which are called to be as non-metal. Example, graphite. Now next we study about hardness. What is hardness? The ability of a material to resist deformation, indentation or penetration is called hardness of the material. Metals are generally hard. Example, tungsten, iridium, steel, titanium, osmium, chromium, etc. Whereas non-metal does not possess any of such characteristics. They are very soft. Next, we would learn about the topic that is malleability. The property of metals by which they can be beaten into thin sheets is known as malleability. Metals are generally malleable, i.e., they can be beaten into thin sheets. Examples of metals are aluminium, iron, etc. Whereas non-metals are not malleable, they cannot be beaten into thin sheets. Therefore, they are not malleable. Example of non-metal are coal, graphite, etc. Now, let us study about another such characteristics of metals, that is conductivity. The property of metals which allow heat and electricity to pass through them is called conductivity. In general, metals are good conductors of heat and electricity. Example, iron, copper, etc. Whereas non-metal does not possess any such characteristics. It means it does not allow electricity and heat to pass through them. Therefore, they are called poor conductors. Example of such non-metals are coal and sulfur. Now, let us go towards the next topic, that is ductility. Ductility is also one of such characteristics of metal. The property of metals by which they can be beaten into thin wires is called ductility. Generally, metals can be beaten into thin wires. Therefore, they are called ductile. Example, aluminium and copper. Whereas non-metals cannot be called ductile because they cannot be drawn into thin sheets. Example is coal and graphite. Now let us study about another characteristic of metals, that is sonorous. The materials which produce a ringing sound when they are struck with a hard object are called sonorous. Since metals produce a ringing sound, they are said to be as sonorous. The materials other than metals are not sonorous. It means that non-metals does not produce any ringing sound when they are struck with a hard object. Hence, they are not sonorous. Now, let us study another topic, that is chemical properties of metals and non-metals. Reaction with oxygen. Metals react with oxygen and produce metallic oxides. Metallic oxides are generally basic in nature. Non-metals react with oxygen and produce non-metallic oxides. Non-metallic oxides are acidic in nature. Example, when sulfur dioxide, a non-metal, is mixed in water, sulfurous acid is formed. The reaction can be given is given sulfur dioxide SO2 plus water H2O is equal to sulfurous acid H2SO3. Now let's go towards the next topic, that is reaction with water. Sodium reacts vigorously with water. Some other metals do not do so. For example, iron reacts with water very slowly. Generally, non-metals do not react with water, though they may be very reactive in air. Such non-metals are usually stored in water. For example, phosphorus. Phosphorus is a very reactive non-metal. It catches fire when exposed to air. To prevent the contact of phosphorus with with atmospheric oxygen, it is always stored in water. Now let us go towards the next topic, that is reaction with acids and bases. Now let's see what happens when metals and non-metals react with acid and bases. Non-metals generally do not react with acids, whereas metals react with acid and produce hydrogen gas. That hydrogen gas burns with a pop sound. Metals, when react with sodium hydroxide, a base, produce hydrogen gas, whereas non-metals reaction with bases is very complex. Now let us study about displacement reaction. A more reactive metal displaces a less reactive metal from its salt solution. This is what displacement reaction. When a more reactive metal is placed in the salt solution of a less reactive metal, then the more reactive metal displaces the less reactive metal from its salt solution. A more reactive metal can replace a less reactive metal, but a less reactive one cannot replace a more reactive metal. Now let's go towards the next topic, that is reactivity series, an arrangement of metal on decreasing or increasing order of reactivity is called reactivity series of metals and non-metals. Now let us revise all the concepts that we have studied in the two parts of the chapter. Let's start. First question is, differentiate between metals and non-metals. So let's answer this question. Metals are generally solid at room temperature except Hg. Hg means mercury. Mercury is in liquid. In the non-metals are solid, liquid as well as gas at room temperature. Metals are lustrous, means they are very shiny, they have their own shine, whereas non-metals are dull in appearance. Example, except iodine, graphite, diamond. They are malleable and ductile. Metals are malleable and ductile, whereas non-metals are not malleable and not ductile. They break into pieces when they are beaten. Metals are good conductors of heat and electricity, whereas non-metals are bad, or you can say poor conductors of heat and electricity, except graphite. Graphite is a good conductor of heat and electricity. Metals are very sonorous, i.e. they produce a ringing sound when they are struck with a hard object. Non-metals are not sonorous. Metals are generally hard, whereas non-metals are comparatively soft, except diamond. Diamond is the hardest material. and it is a non-metal. Now let's go towards the second and the last question, that is define the following terms. So let's see what are the terms that we are going to define. That is atom. Atom is the smallest unit into which matter can be divided without the release of electrically charged particles. It also is the smallest unit of matter that has the characteristic properties of a chemical element. As such, the atom is the basic building block of chemistry. Conductor. The material which allow heat and electricity to pass through it are called conductor. In general, metals are good conductors of heat and electricity, whereas non-metals are poor conductors. Displacement reaction. The reaction in which a more reactive metal displaces a less reactive one from its salt solution is known as displacement reaction. Always remember that a more reactive metal can displace a less reactive metal, but a less reactive one cannot displace a more reactive one. Now let's see the example of displacement reaction. Zinc is more reactive than copper, so it replaces copper from copper sulfate solution. Zn, that is zinc, plus copper sulfate solution, that is CuSO4, is zinc sulfate solution plus copper. Now let's go towards the fourth term, that is ductility. Now let's define this term also. Ductility is the property of metals by which they can be drawn into thin wires. Metals are generally ductile, whereas non-metals are not ductile. Elements. All matter are made up of substances called elements. Chemical element, usually called element, is any substance that cannot be decomposed into simpler substances by ordinary chemical processes. Elements are the fundamental materials of which all matter is composed of. Now let's go towards the sixth term, that is hardness. The ability of a material to resist deformation, indentation or penetration is called hardness of the material. Metals are generally hard and non-metals are not hard. It means they are comparatively soft. But a non-metal named diamond is the world's hardest material. Now let's go towards the seventh term, that is malleability. The property of metals by which they can be beaten into thin sheets is called malleability. Metals are generally malleable, whereas non-metals are not malleable. Now let's go towards the eighth term, that is metals. The elements which are typically hard, shiny, malleable, ductile, sonorous, a good conductor of heat and electricity, and form positive ions by losing electrons are called metals. Example of metals are copper, sodium, iron, etc. Metalloids. The elements having the properties of both metals and non-metals are called metalloids. Example: arsenic, germanium, silicon, boron, etc. Non-metals. The elements which lack the physical properties of metal and form negative ions by gaining electrons are called non-metals. Example: sulfur, bromine, oxygen, etc. Sonorous. The materials which produce a ringing sound when they are struck with a hard object are called sonorous. Example: metals such as iron, copper, silver, etc. Whereas non-metals are not sonorous. So that's all for this chapter, guys. Hope you liked our video. In this video, we discussed some topics related to chapter number 4 of science class 8, that is materials, metals and non-metals. We discussed about physical as well as chemical properties of both metals and non-metals. Hope you liked our video. In the next video, we will try to continue we will try to start the chapter number 5 of science class 8, that is coal and petroleum. Thanks a lot for watching my video, guys. Please do like and share my video and also subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon to never miss any latest update from our channel. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Bye bye.